Погребана е кралицата Елизабета II, круната што ја обединува британската држава и Комонвелтот. На островот секоја Шкотска има посебен белег во Британија. Но кога ќе разговарате со граѓанин на Шкотска, како што е Алистер Стујард, и кога знаете дека е македонски зет, не може да останете равнодушен кон неговите погледи за Македонија, посебно по атаците од Бугарија. Алистер Стујард неодамна има објавено колумна која се однесува на Преспанскиот договор. На почеток од разговорот го прашав дали натаму го дели мислењето дека Преспанскиот договор е лош и покрај тоа што Македонија стана членка на НАТО и го започна скринингот за членство во Европската унија.
4 years is a long time. A lot has changed in the world, but that specific agreement struck a chord with me. Really, the detail of it is what concerned me, and there were two angles. The first was looking at it objectively as any international observer. I looked at it and thought, okay, that is what it is. It's just another deal in the world. It's just another treaty. And then I looked more closely at it, thinking about my family connection with Macedonia, and I looked at it through a different perspective. I spoke with family, I spoke with friends here. I listened and read very closely at the detail. I thought then, and I think now, that it is a character assassination on the country, that it is unusual in the scope and the scale of what it is giving away to foreign governments to decide your character, your self-determination. And yet it is, as we would say, it's wrapped up and presented as a good idea and a healthy idea. I thought then that it was monstrous, and I think now even more so that it's a terrible, terrible idea and a terrible treaty that gives far too much control away to other governments, not least of all a name change, which when I have conversations with friends back in Scotland, they ask me, where is South Macedonia? I can't tell them. It doesn't make sense. And I feel very passionately about that.
In one of your articles, you have wrote the Zaev government's decision to agree the Greek demands is the catastrophic victory. The compromise is for political perspective. Do you think that decision is wrong?
I do.
When North Macedonia is still part of NATO?
I do. I agree with Macedonia's membership of NATO. I think that, particularly given what's happened in Ukraine, I think that that was a sensible decision. But the other demands placed on the country and agreed to by your own government are morally unconscionable. I think that if you give too much away, what's left at the end? And the name change is one part. It's a very obvious part. Everyone can see that. The insertion of North is silly, but the detail, the control that your own government has given to other countries it's not a compromise, it's not a concession, it's a surrender. And if the same thing happened in Scotland, say if Scotland was independent and the same deal was made with the governments of England and Wales, there would be protests every day on the streets.
In one of your articles, you made a parallel between Macedonian and Greek dispute and the Scotland problem before Brexit decision.
Brexit is a problem. It's a democratic problem for Scotland. Scotland voted overwhelmingly to stay in the European Union. The rest of the UK did not. And there are two governments in the UK between Scotland and the United Kingdom. There's the government at Westminster and there's the government at Holyrood in Edinburgh. And both of them are now at what we would call a loggerheads. You cannot break this stalemate. the comparison that I made at the time between Scotland and Macedonia was that democratic mandates must be respected. In Scotland, that is, as you say, that it is a problem. It is an unresolved problem, and it needs to be addressed. Some people want Scottish independence. Some people want a fundamental move to federalism, a change. I am in favour of the latter. With Macedonia, the democratic mandate with, for example, the referendum, was you had you didn't have a threshold, the correct threshold. The government said we will respect it. They didn't respect it, and they pushed on anyway. So, never mind the treaty, the decision making. Your own government ignored your people.
But the majority in Great Britain were against Great Britain to exit from European Union.
The majority of parts of the United Kingdom were for it. So England, for example, voted to leave. Scotland voted to stay. And that irreconcilability is the problem that we have now. The vote to leave was a foreign policy decision, essentially. And a foreign policy decision can be made at the UK level. Normally, issues like health and education and law are areas for the Scottish government. The Scottish government is now saying, well, Brexit has affected all of this. It has impacted all of this. And our decision was to stay. Where's the democracy in that?
Why the historical and national question are part of the political scene?
Scotland and England joined together in 1707. And Scotland was a state then. They were separate countries. They came together to make one new country. But Scotland never lost its national identity. It was always a nation. And there are some arguments, some people, particularly those who want Scotland to be independent, they say that the problems that we are experiencing today have been there for 300 years. So the historical arguments are as relevant today as they were then. The problem with that is that many modern things today, like modern health, modern transport, modern infrastructure, they didn't exist then. So to say that the two can just be separated easily is incorrect. But the historical consciousness, the feeling of Scottishness and Britishness is at least 300 years old. And it's very relevant today. It's a real emotional, provocative subject between Scottishness and Britishness. It can be a very hot topic for people.
Do you think that the Prespa agreement, after Prespa agreement, we have a problem with Bulgaria, government, the Prime Minister Zaev and Borisov made an agreement 2017, but after 5 years the neighboring country still have problem. Why?
I think it is the fundamentals of the agreement. It was called a friendship agreement. Having a gun to your friend's head is not friendship. And it's like that children's ride in a play park. You go round and you go round and you go round. Every time an agreement is made, every time a discussion is made, Macedonia gives more and more and more and more. Bulgaria, the Bulgarian government, because I think there's an important separation between people and government, the Bulgarian government will not ever be happy with the Macedonian question. And a larger neighbour with something to prove will want more and more and more until what's left? in 5, 10, 15 years.
How can the Macedonia people have a problem with the nationality and identity?
It's not for me to talk about Macedonian identity.
Because you have said that the Prespa agreement and also the agreement with Bulgaria is catastrophic. Why for Macedonia is this compromise not good?
I'm married to a Macedonian, and we will have one day a half Macedonian child. And it worries me significantly how I listen to my in-laws, my family here, and I listen to what they say about their national character, their national identity, how they feel about things. And it concerns me significantly that that child, much like my wife, that your own government is giving more and more control of how that identity is expressed and represented. As a foreigner, as a Westerner, it's not for me to say if national character is good or bad. That policy, that attitude has caused nothing but problems. But as someone with friends here and family here and my wife from here, I look at the future and I think that if you have treaties with your largest neighbors, and you're giving more and more away, particularly with control over education and who decides what is in it, what is not in it, what is okay and not okay, it won't be national identity anymore. It won't be true of you today.
But the subject is that without compromise with Bulgaria and Greece, we cannot enter in European Union. We cannot be part of NATO.
The problem is not just Bulgaria, the Bulgarian and the Greek governments. The problem is the European Union, such as France and the France agreement, the France proposal that was put forward. Western countries are being hypocritical on this issue. And that is true of France, and it is true of Germany, and it is true of Great Britain. You cannot be true to the principle of self-determination if you are accepting new members who are having to sell their soul to join NATO and the European Union. Those are not principles on which the European Union and NATO were founded. Macedonia is lesser known. It's not so well known. It's not, certainly in the West, it's not shouting, it's not screaming about these issues. The article that you were talking about that I wrote 4 years ago, some people had no idea about this topic. None. To join these organizations, you have to have universal standards. Some compromise, yes, of course. These are complicated, old issues. Some compromise is fine. But having to sell to change your name, to give control over your education system, to have forced joint exchanges, to join the European Union and to join NATO is absurd. It is a standard which would never have been expected of other European countries. And I think part of the problem is that Macedonia is a small country and its international awareness, people being aware of it, is less so. Part of that problem is to do with the Western perspective and understanding of the Balkans. They look at the Balkans and they see old, complicated issues and violence and things. Some of that is true in the past. This is a modern, thriving country. It's great for investment. It's great to visit. It's got wonderful people. And I have a connection that concerns me that as time goes on, your own governments will see the European Union, they see NATO, and they will do anything to get in. what will be left? But that's one problem. The other problem is Western leaders thinking that's okay. It's a hypocrisy.
How will be the European perspective without European Union?
I think the European perspective is, the European Union is a good thing. But Brexit in the United Kingdom, the argument about Brexit in the United Kingdom was yes or no. You leave or you stay in. The European Union needs reformed. It is in many ways very undemocratic. And in my travels, in my experience, the European perspective on issues is for cooperation and agreement, but there needs to be more democracy at a decision-making level. And I think that if more Europeans understood what was happening and what has happened in Macedonia and what's going on with Bulgaria and what's going on with Greece and what's going on with Albania, if people understood that, they would be angrier. The crisis in Ukraine has shown, the war in Ukraine has shown that European consciousness is alive. It's there. But more people need to be aware and need to know about the issues happening here, because the European Union is acting in their name. And I think that they are acting unfairly in many ways.
Thank you for the interview.
Thank you very much.